The viewers, good morning. I'm Major General Neelendra Kumar talking to you for the playlist in Semilier for my channel Lex Concilium Foundation. I'm privileged to be here with Sikyong Penpa Tsering, who's the head of Tibetan Government in Exile, Central Tibetan Administration. And I'd like to tell you that he was for 2 tenures member of parliament there, and finally in the election that he won, there were voters were spread over 26 countries, in fact perhaps 30 countries, and the voter turnout was 72%, which by any standard is much more than the voting that we see here in our country. And much before that, in the 12th examination board, he had topped in his school and in the examination. So he's had a brilliant academic career. And now my question to him is that he has spoken about, he indicated about the resolute crackdown by the Chinese government in Tibet. Now within that frame, I would like to particularly tell our viewers the aspects relating to propaganda and education more so in the context of children and young students.
Now, since China occupied Tibet, initially they had to use Tibetan for propaganda, because Tibetan people don't understand any Chinese. We live in 2 totally different countries, and there are very few Tibetans who understand Chinese. Then later, of course, the language itself became a victim to, then there was this 10 long years of cultural revolution from 1966 to 76, where they destroyed everything old, including some 6,000 monasteries in Tibet and 1.2 million Tibetans having directly or indirectly died because of China's occupation of Tibet. Now,
you said 1.2 million took part. Yes,
Tibetans
opposed.
Died.
Yes, died
directly or indirectly as a result of China's occupation, out of 6 million Tibetans. So the persecution was very, very severe and very brutal also. Then in the early 80s, after Deng Xiaoping came, there was little freedom with Hu Yaobang also as the premier of the Communist Party. They sent teams to Tibet to study the situation. They found that it was much worse than before 1959, and they decided to send back 85% of the Chinese cadres and all that. So for a brief period there was little, and Panchen Rinpoche, the former Panchen Rinpoche, was also released. He also played a very important role in bringing back Tibetan language in the monastic institutions and schools. Then there was martial law in Tibet. In 87, 88, there were some demonstrations, and Hu Jintao was the party secretary in Tibet, and he imposed martial law. And since then, it has been deteriorating, but not that bad during Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, their presidencies. There was little opening up of China. Now, if you see the huge contrast from Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao's time to Xi Jinping's time, starting from 2013-14, when all these changes took place, even on the streets. 10 years before, you would see more commercials of business. Now you see all Xi Jinping thoughts on streets, even on billboards, and that's how much China has changed in terms of ideology. And the propaganda now, it's not restricted only within China. It's not just about creating a unified Tibet-Chinese nation. I think they are looking more like how US became a nation, where people it's a melting pot of all civilization, people coming from so many different backgrounds. They also wanted something similar, but what's happening in the United States is happening naturally. And what's happening in China, the government is trying to impose these kind of things, so which does not really work well with the aspiration of the people, because the problem with the Chinese government is they think that solution to any problem or challenge is development. They are very unidimensional in their thinking. they don't think about aspiration of people from different angles. They only think that development is key or solution to every problem, and that is where they are getting stuck. So even now they are in the doldrums because of economy, so they are not able to define which is more important, security or economy, because both are interlinked in many ways.
But you had mentioned that there was a period when there was martial law in force.
Yes, in
Now,
1989.
I would like you to clarify that when that period was over and martial law was lifted, from the Chinese perspective, had their control over Tibet become more strong? That's why they thought that they can do without martial law? Or what? How do you view it?
Martial law was more to control the unrest or the peaceful protest by the Tibetans in 1987-88 at 3 different time periods. So that was lifted once they thought that they have secured the peacefulness. But again, there was demonstration in 2008. So these are periodic. Even with so much control, people are still rising up.
So the resistance has not stopped?
No,
not at all.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. Even after 65 years, Chinese government thought that we have transformed Tibet, we have created Tibet into a socialist paradise, as they call it. And then I would suggest they invite you to go to Tibet and see for themselves whether it's a socialist paradise or a hell. So those things keep happening. So the propaganda is not just restricted only to within China or the nationality areas, but now Chinese ambitions extend beyond that. Now they are talking about global security initiatives, where they redefine human rights from their understanding of what human rights should be, because they have taken over most of the instruments of the United Nations, particularly in the human rights field. So they are talking about now global civilizational or cultural initiatives. They are talking about global economic initiatives. So it's not just restricted only to China or the neighborhood, whereas they want their hegemonistic ambitions alive, but at the same time they want European market and the American market while pivoting towards global south. So all these things are happening. But if you really look at what Xi Jinping is doing, talking about rise and falls of empires in history, and that it should happen to Communist Party, but what he is doing right now exactly is expediting the fall of communism.
Now you spoke about, you have covered the propaganda aspect.
Yes.
What would you like to talk about, say with regard to the education in Tibet now?
No, it's not just us who are speaking about it. There were reports from the UN Special Rapporteurs. They were researched initially by Tibet Action Institute and reproduced, I think, in collaboration with Citizen Lab. So many agencies, unbiased agencies, have also come out with reports about colonial-style boarding schools in Tibet, where children are kept away from their family, away from their language, away from their way of life, to turn every Tibetan into a Chinese citizen. They are given military training, even in school level. Now everything is to do with allegiance to the party. So there is no class on Tibetan history, literature, nothing. Even in libraries, they have removed all reference books in Tibetan.
So from their mind, Tibet and things Tibetan are being erased.
Everything is being erased, and that is being engineered by the state. That would have severe consequences if this continues for 10-15 years, because you're going to change a whole generation of Tibetan youngsters.
Now this is something quite horrifying, the concept and what the effect, the impact of what the Chinese are doing in Tibet to erase the notion of Tibet and Tibetan from the minds of the new generation. And this, after all, is one of the biggest blow to the human rights, to the free media, free speech and free expression the world over. Please be with us, stay with us. This conversation with Penpa Tsering would continue. Thank you.